With the GOP convention in the books and the Democratic convention getting underway in Philadelphia, this week's First Look examines the changing role of these grand political spectacles and how that role has shifted over the years. The entrance of Donald Trump on night one of the GOP convention. A prime example of the carefully choreographed convention process designed to boost a candidate's image and poll numbers. Oh yeah, there's also that matter of delegates officially nominating the candidate. But some say the conventions just aren't necessary in today's political climate.
And their argument is, well, these are pep rallies. No news is actually happening here.
University of Delaware professor Paul Brewer specializes in political communication. And there's perhaps no bigger stage for political communication than the conventions.
So if you watch the evening news, you see sound bites of candidates, you might see 8 seconds. These conventions, the nominees get to speak up there on stage to a national television audience for, an hour, or if it's Bill Clinton, maybe 2 hours. So that's a huge opportunity for candidates.
In years past, the convention served the voting public to introduce candidates like Mitt Romney.
I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
Or even a Barack Obama.
America, we cannot turn back. Not with so much work to be done.
Politicians the voting public may not have been very familiar with. Although with so much attention already focused on this year's campaign, the conventions might not make as much of a difference as previous years.
This time around, it's hard to believe that there are that many Americans who haven't thought or heard too much about Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. So a lot of people may already know who these candidates are. They're really high-profile candidates already. And so there's not as much introduction that's being taken place, so there might not be as much room to move people's opinions.
After the speeches have been made, the balloons dropped, and the confetti has fallen, what's the end result? Maybe a small bump in the polls.
Historically, most conventions give what insiders call a bounce. That is, compared to where they are going into the convention, candidates come out with a bump in the polls. Maybe 3 or 4 or 5% is typical.
And that's if everything goes as planned, which hasn't always happened. Whether it's riots at the 1968 DNC in Chicago, or Clint Eastwood's awkward conversation with an empty chair at the GOP's 2012 convention in Tampa.
What do you mean, shut up? Okay.
Things don't always go as planned.
This time around, we might see that typical bounce if the conventions go as planned, but maybe there's not as much room for a bounce just because the candidates are so well known and people have already made up their minds by and large about Clinton and Trump.
This year's Republican convention has also been built to create more unity within the GOP behind Donald Trump after what's obviously been a tumultuous primary season. But now that turmoil, at least officially, is over. Trump is the Republican nominee. How effective that official status will be for Republicans who aren't really Trump fans remains to be seen.
So it seemed like the GOP spent a lot of time talking about Hillary Clinton during its convention. Should we expect something similar about Trump at the DNC?
Probably, right? It seems likely that the Democrats will return the favor and go on the attack and attack Trump's flaws and missteps during that long primary season. We've already seen that in ads that the Clinton campaign has been running in heavy rotation, kind of highlighting those flaws. They're tough, but they're using Trump's own words against him, right? So both of these candidates have really high negatives, and it seems like instead of a post-convention bump, they're aiming for a post-convention bump in their opponent's negatives rather than building support for themselves. And like Trump, Hillary doesn't really need much of an introduction to most of the voting public. So we'll have to see how much the DNC really focuses on Hillary's background versus tearing Trump down.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. And first, we'll be at the Democratic National Convention next week in Philadelphia. We'll have a full recap of the convention and check in with the Delaware delegation next Friday. Coverage of the Democratic National Convention takes place from 8 to 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday on WHYY TV.